Okay, so welcome to our seminar this morning, afternoon my time. Today we're going to be talking about privacy, user privileges, and a bit of network security in CenTrak Omni. And let's jump in. So what are the challenges? So we've got general public regulations. So we've got HIPAA on the one end. On the North American side, GDPR in Europe. GDPR is a bit different than HIPAA. HIPAA is specifically for healthcare. GDPR is general data privacy, allowing people to demand that companies kind of like remove their private data. And HIPAA is particularly for healthcare. One of the things we're going to be looking at as far as HIPAA, it is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And accountability is very important. First of all, we want to be able to restrict what a user can see as far as the badges in the system, right? So we want to be able to say, okay, you can only see tags of a certain group in a certain area, etc. So that's the requirement number one. Number two is we only want to show alerts from a particular, that are designated or that user should be able to see and not see other alerts as well. We want to also enable and disable which applications within or modules within Omni that the user can run. And we don't want users to make any changes to, if they don't have the authorization to do so, to make changes, to change names, to change statuses, to add, remove things from the database. We want to have detailed accountability. So everything, all of the actions that are performed in the system, whether they be query of data or change of data, needs to be audited and logged in the history database so that at a later time you can then generate a report showing who did what. We also need to comply with the latest means of authentication. So when a user logs in, we want to make sure that we have all of those in place, all of that authentication and how we're going to achieve that. And just as kind of like off topic is encryption between the client and server, report generator, et cetera, within Omni and the server, okay? So that's a topic or a slide I'm gonna be touching on. So the first thing we wanna look at is how we restrict a user from seeing badges that he shouldn't be seeing, right? So let's say we want to restrict the staff from only seeing baby tags, but not the mother tags, or not the other staff, or not other residents, right? Just one group of tags. So how do we do that, right? So here we've got the EV2, and in the EV2 we've got the badge model, badge filters. And we create a, let's say we call it baby filter, and in that case I'll select only the baby tags. I can also select a specific location or group of locations and specific status types. So and that's called a badge filter. We had various uses, applications for the badge filters. For example, when you want to monitor for the raw messages coming in, you can create a filter and only see the raw data from that complies with that filter. If you recall, the outgoing extension that sends, let's say, UDP or TCP messages around every relocation, and you can create a filter for that, okay, using the badge filter. So it's a kind of a generic way of filtering tags. Now we want to apply that to a specific user. So to do that, I'm going to jump in to my web client. And in the web client, I'm going to go to the Access Manager. And in the Access Manager, I have my various users here. So I have a baby match user. And I edit that user, and you'll see here I can select a badge filter over here, and I'll select one of those filters. And from that point on, the baby only filter will show only the baby tags. Where will I apply that? So I can apply that filter then gets applied to any web client app. So it's the actual browser app, the web client, the OmniGo, and the LPAS display panel. All of those implement that filter. So based on the user for which you're logged in, you'll only see that those tags. So if I go ahead, hit now, and I log out, and I log in as baby match, First of all, which I'll discuss, you'll see that we only have 2 applications. I'll mention that in the upcoming slide. But then when I logged in, 2 things occurred, and I'll also touch on that in other slides. When I opened up the badge view, it didn't show any badges, and we're going to talk about that, right? That's enhanced privacy function. And then when I hit the apply filter, I only see the babies, and I only see the baby group here. So it's filtering what I can select, it's filtering what it's displaying, and it's only showing what that user is privileged to see based on the filter for which you've associated that user. Any questions thus far about badge filters and associating badge filters to users, right? Okay. Next thing is user access to web apps. So if I go back to my main page here, I'm sorry, I'm going to log out, log back in as supervisor. Now I have the access manager. So now I'm going to go, instead of users and profiles, I'm going to go to the application access. Before you saw that, when I logged in as Baby Match, I only saw the alerts. I only saw the, if I recall, the asset manager and the badge viewer, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see, yep. Asset manager. Yeah. So now the Baby Match, let's see, which one were they? Certainly the badge viewer. Execute. Yeah, because it's the operator profile. So what I could do is I can go ahead and, let's say, have the another one of these applications, the corrections dashboard, let's say, and apply that to my Baby Match user and to the operator profile, apply the changes. And now I'm going to log out, and I'm going to log in again as the Baby Match. Okay, let's do 1, 2, 3. And now you see I have another application. I've got the corrections dashboard showing up here as a third application. So we have the asset, the badge view, and the corrections dashboard now. That's adding applications to users. Okay. Now, next is how do I filter which alerts a particular user will use when he's logged in? And again, this will apply to all of the EDP, to the web client, to the OmniGo, all 3 of those applications that get alerts. We are going to define a client. We all know that clients are used to designate and to route alerts to specific stations or phones or web clients, right? And based on which client, normally when you go into a client, when you go into, let's go and log out here and go back into the supervisor. So normally if I go into the alerts view, I can then go ahead and I can change the associated client ID. Oh no, because now supervisor is now associated with David's laptop. But if the user wasn't associated with a client, then I would be able to select. But once the user is associated with a particular client, then it's forced to use that client and thereby only get and subscribe to the alerts designated for that client, right? So we link alerts to client and client to user. And if I have a look at, if I go back now to my access manager and I look at my user, this is where I can select the client for that particular user, and that would determine which alerts that user will get. Okay. Questions? Any questions thus far?
David, I have a question.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I understand this correctly, because in many of our facilities, especially on the senior living side, staff members don't always, aides and such, they don't always work in the same environment. So when they log in with the app, they're choosing which, by client, of course, they're choosing what area of the building they're going to be working in that day. And so they would only get alerts relative to where they're working in the building. So in that case, with their profile, how can I limit them? Because they need to be able, when they log out, they're logged out, period. There's no client. And how can I restrict them from logging into a client that they should not be logged in as, such as the server client or the administrator client?
What we would use for that is the shift manager. We have an application called a shift manager. Alerts are associated with client groups, and then the shift manager automatically moves the clients, which are the phones of the nurses, in and out of these groups based on the time zone. So that way it automatically, now if the head nurse wants to now reassign a particular client to a different area, they can do that, right? So let's take that offline, but I think that was designated. We did that for Securitas in Norway, and it's quite a powerful application to be used for shift and assigning staff to particular rooms, et cetera, or wards.
So that means, though, that the management would have to choose and log that user in.
Correct. That it would be the responsibility of the administrator to assign which rooms are going to which nurses.
I got you.
Shifts.
Okay.
If you want to leave it up to the nurses themselves, so don't assign, so just leave this alone. This is more, again, of a privacy thing. If you have someone who doesn't, who shouldn't be seeing alerts or certain alerts, then you want to be able to lock that user into a specific client.
Okay.
Okay. Now you want to be able to restrict certain operations within Omni to certain users. And for that, it gets a little confusing because some of those actions that we inherited from old Iris are specifically for a user profile and then directly to the user. And some are designated for specific applications. Let's see if I go into here and I go to users and profiles, right? And I can edit the profiles. And there are lots of different events that are particular, like modify objects. Modify objects is a big one, and that would prevent the user from being able to add or change badges, etc. Right? So that is in general for anything on the system. And you can also access to the setup screens, and you can restrict that so the user won't be able to go into setup. That is here. Now there's also application access. So if I go to the alerts view, I see that I've got all of these. For example, if I want to enable or disable acknowledgement of an alert, or if I want to be able to enable or disable closing of a single or closing all events, I could do that from here, right? These are kind of policies and actions that were added more recently. So they're kind of two different user interfaces here, and you need to look in both for what you're looking for. There is some logical distinction between the two, but yeah. So that's...
Do you mind if I just clarify with what you just said? Because I think you just solved a problem that we've had that we've brought up a number of times, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing here now means that if I have a staff member that is logged in to work in a certain area, if an alert comes to the app, and this only applied to the app.
Yep.
When they're not allowed to, I can restrict them from being able to hit the acknowledge button and stopping all escalations from moving forward, correct?
Correct.
So that takes care of it, because that was a big problem. As you know, if they clicked acknowledge, we no longer had any, and they didn't respond, we didn't have any more escalations. Right.
That's correct. So that's what you would do that from here.
Thank you. Perfect.
Great. I'm glad you're happy, Terry. You're happy. I'm happy. Okay. So that is actions: access to setup screens, close and acknowledge alerts, edit event details via handler, so you can restrict them from messing around with the alert, from closing the alert. Modify objects, you can restrict them from editing badge details, changing statuses, etc. So that's regarding restricting actions. Now, what about the accountability, right? So for the accountability, we've got actually a few, two different reports in the history. And if I go back, let's go into EV2 now and go into my system object. I've got the history recorder, and I select on events what it's going to record. And as you see here, it's got user audit. These are the various events that it will record into the audit as user audit into the history database. And then how would I see what's been done? Then I would go out and go to my report generator and have a look at the audit operation, right? And hit execute. I can filter on specific users. I can filter on specific event types, right? And hit the execute, and it'll take me to that alert. Now, this is what we're doing here is every time you open up a screen, right? Let's say I go ahead and I go to the badges screen and I want to view badge viewer, right? And I want to view all of the asset tags, and I hit apply filter. So basically what I've just done is I've initiated a query in the database. Now that's an action that according to HIPAA, you need to record that so that you can audit on that and see who is it that viewed the assets or the staff or the babies or whatever at a particular time. Let's see if anybody's touched that data. So now, okay, that was the assets. If I go ahead back into my reports and run this again. So if that would be the next one probably. Yeah, so this is at 5:22 my time, right? That's 10:22 your time. You can see that it's listed on history recorder, which is a bug, I guess. It shouldn't be, but it is the supervisor. That's the user who did it, the timestamp. The name of the machine that performed the query, and the actual query. So it says here, group filter assets, right? So we see exactly what it was he queried on, which is pretty neat. And so now this was very important to put as much information in here as possible for HIPAA compliance. So that goes to accountability. Who ran a report, who modified an object, and changing tag status. You're arming and disarming baby tags. You want to know who did it, right? So that actually would be a different report. Status changes we're covering through a separate report of status changes, right? So if I go ahead now and I go into my this asset here, which is currently in the dirty status, and I'm going to change it to back to the active, let's say, apply that. So it says now active. So if I go into my reports, and now there's this status report, status change, execute that. And here at 5:24, I've changed this asset or location. Okay, it's not telling me the tag that I'm changing. I have to check out why it's not showing the tag, but its status was changed, and I got that. I'm gonna have to have a look at that. So that's actions taken and alert events. All these things are audited, are saved to the history log. What is the enhanced privacy? So you saw earlier that when I opened up the badge screen, the badge viewer for the first time, so let me close that. Let's go back to the main page here and go into the badge viewer. And as you can see, it's empty. Even though the assets is ticked here, I have to hit the apply filter and only then will I see it. That was in order to be able to make sure that we are, we're auditing everything and that everything is only what the user wants to see and nothing appears that the user didn't ask for, right? That is very important. Again, HIPAA compliance, and to do that, you need to run the iris config. I've got, if you need to access this, I'll have to send you the INI settings, but suffice it to say here, if I open up my iris config, and I go into the all system, I have the enable enhanced privacy variable that I would set to 1. If I set it back to 0, let's see if this happens in real time without restarting anything. So if I go back to my main page and then go back to the badge viewer, so now it's showing it as it launched, okay? So that's something, obviously you need access privileges to get into the iris config, but that's, yeah, that's the enhanced privacy option. The next thing is, okay, we've got all these features that are user specific, but the Achilles heel here is the login, right? The login has to be secure. And a lot of these RFPs are coming out requiring that the login comply with certain rules of encryption, with requiring the user to change his password every X number of days, etc. Stored by whatever. So obviously, we don't want to do all that. We don't want to develop that itself. That's a technology we want to implement from a third party, and the third best, no better than Active Directory from Microsoft, right? So what you can do is define users in Omni that are Active Directory users, right? So you do that, going back to my EV2 here, and Active Directory, and this is where you put in the login credentials for your Active Directory. Then you can import users from the Active Directory, and then what you do is it imports them. If there are particular groups or whatever, it'll assign those. But in general, once the user is defined, then you can change the user privileges within Omni using the normal tools. But when the user logs in, it will authenticate that user against the Active Directory. So any rules that exist for users within Active Directory, i.e. you have to change your password, you have a certain password complexity that you need, certain character types, whatever is set in Active Directory, that's what applies. So you can tick off the compliance in these RFPs because we support Active Directory credential authentication. Yeah. And I think this is my last slide. Secure Omni communication. I did a video, so you can have a look at in the channel for that video, is how to set up SSL security between the various clients. So whether it be web client, whether it be OmniGo, etc., it will connect to the server using the SSL and thereby have full encryption as needed. To get your certificate, you go online, you either pay for it or you get a free certificate that's limited to 3 months. That's what I do. And then you have to, then you get the certificate, you have to prove that you're the only owner of the website. Once you prove it by putting a certain file within the website, then it will read it. It'll then send you the certificate files. You put those certificate files in the under the SSL folder in Omni. So it's under, we go to, hold on. Omni server data SSL. So here are your certificate files. So it's server, the CRT file, the key file, etc. And once those files are in there, they will appear under if you go into the Apache web server under SSL, that certificate will appear here and you have to select it. And if you have a certain domain name that is, you should put that in there. And FYI, the default port for the HTTPS connection is 8092 versus the 8090, which we were used to in the for the normal HTTP connection. But for the secure SSL, basically you would connect to the server without specifying a port, and it would, based on if the SSL is supported on the server, it'll automatically route the inbound traffic to 8092. You don't have to actually explicitly define that. So if I, for example, Fenster Home, this is my server here. And as you can see here, it's showing that it is a secure connection and have a valid certificate, etc. So the communication between the client and the server is fully secure. All right. Yep, I think that's today's talk. Good, right on.
Thank you very much. Excellent.
Yeah, you're welcome, Terry. And look out, CenTrak should share with you the recording if you guys want it. And that's it. If any other questions, if not.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Thank you.
David.
You're welcome. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.